got to turn this on, right? Oh, okay. Good morning, everybody. My name's Chris. I'm an alcoholic. I'm doing everything wrong this morning. I'm sitting in the back. Steve's like, you gotta get up front. It's one of those days. Before I get started, I want to call out a couple of people. Certainly, I want to call out Steve over here. Steve is one of my favorite speakers out there, and I hear a lot of people, right? I think he's the best communicator we have out there. He'll take a spiritual concept and he'll have a story or an example, and you come out of that as clear as you can be with it, because sometimes it's really difficult communicating spiritual material. It's hard to use the English language to do it. And he's certainly one of the best. Peter has been a friend of mine so long, and God speaks through that guy. When Peter's on the beam, you're in the presence of something really special. I want to say something about Bill. I think the whole atmosphere of this event really comes from Bill. It's just, I hardly ever go to things like this unless I'm part of it, because I get enough of them normally. But I wanted to come up to this because the last time I was here, I experienced something really special. This is just a beautiful place. And the last person I want to comment on is Barefoot Bill over here. So he has an incredible collection of stuff, and there's a lot of tapers out there, and they've all got good things, but he makes it a point to have real recovery, real transformational stuff on his table. He's really good at that. And I have a suggestion for anybody in here. Go up to Bill, tell him where you are in your recovery and say, who should I be listening to? And he'll give you a recommendation that'll knock your socks off. I guarantee it. All right, so with that introduction, what I'd like to do is I'd like to start with what our real problem is here as alcoholics. And one of the best statements I've found for that is on page 174 in the 12 and 12. This is buried in tradition 9 for some crazy reason. And it says this: unless each AA member follows to the best of their ability our suggested 12 steps to recovery, they almost certainly sign their own death warrant. So this was written in the early 50s. Bill had seen a lot of stuff, and he'd seen the people who came in and who, in the early days, they called it people that meant business. So the people that meant business were the people that got involved with the spiritual work that was put in front of them, which certainly was the 12 steps. And he saw that the people that really paid a lot of attention and put some effort into the 12 steps stayed around. And he noticed that the people who didn't really stick it out. It says, his drunkenness and disillusion are not penalties inflicted by people in authority. They result from his personal disobedience to spiritual principles. So this is another statement that I think is really telling. You'll see people relapse, right? And their ego is going to want to own a reason for their relapse. Like, well, you wouldn't believe what happened, like all this, I had all this pride, and then this happened, and she left, and I lost my job, and they want to own the relapse. But I think it's something deeper than that. And what Bill is saying about our drunkenness and our disillusion, they're not inflicted upon us. They result from personal disobedience to spiritual principles. Don't you know somewhere in your heart that that's true? There's a certain amount of effort and attitude that you're going to need to have with this Alcoholics Anonymous stuff to be able to stay here. And that's kind of the statement of the challenge. And this is one of my favorite sentences ever, and this is from the foreword to the 12 and 12. It's the third paragraph. And it says, AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. You know, what a great sentence. And if I unpack that a little bit, you know, the 12 steps are spiritual principles. They offer me a way of reacting to life, of living. And if I practice them as a way of life, what'll happen is they'll expel the obsession to drink. So this is what I believe. I believe that when I align myself with a spiritual life, and the steps are Spiritual Living 101, when I align myself with that, I get released from alcohol. It's not a fight. It's all of a sudden that obsession of the mind, the preoccupation with alcohol, it drops off of me, and all of a sudden I find that I'm paying attention to other things, and I'm involved in other things, and I'm released from it. I have a reprieve from that obsession of the mind. And the real good news is it enables me to become happily and usefully whole. I always wanted that. I don't know about you, but I drank, you know, because I was just a mess and, you know, emotionally distraught and freaked out and detoxing and all this. And I drank to become happy and whole. And because the alcohol would give me a false sense of happiness and wholeness. And then I would become a vomiting pig and crash a car, you know. But it's what I always wanted, and I always needed. So these principles, if I practice them, that's what's going to happen. And there are two steps that I think need to become a body of work for us as we move into this thing called recovery. And step 10 and step 11 are two steps that they need to become a working part of how I react to life and how I live. They absolutely have to. So I didn't really understand that I was causing most of my problems. I didn't understand that my perspective on life was damaged and inconsistent with any kind of spirituality or any kind of comfort. I show up in Alcoholics Anonymous really thinking I know. Think you know, I might have a dark, complicated perspective on the world. But you know, I see things, and you know, this is just how I am, and it would have been really, really difficult for you to convince me that really was my problem. I was my problem. So in step 1, I loved what Steve said the other night about my life isn't hard to manage. It's unmanageable. I love that. So in step 1, I'm really tasked with really looking at my alcoholism, understanding my alcoholism and looking at my alcoholism, and coming to terms with how much trouble I'm in. And then in step 2, I'm asked to come to believe that there's a power that I can align with. There's a power that I can work toward relationship and connection with that's going to solve my problem. And both of those things for me were kind of evolutionary. It wasn't like a light switch was flipped. It was like the more experience I had, the more meetings I went to, the more literature I understood, the more my sponsor worked with me, the deeper those two steps became for me. But in step 3, one of the emphases is both Steve and Peter really emphasize this, and this is where I'm at in my recovery today as well. Selfishness and self-centeredness. So between page 60 and 63 or 64, there's information on how selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my troubles. How various forms of self have defeated me, and he goes into it at depth about what my real problem is. My real problem is in my belief systems, in the way I think, in the way I react. My instincts run awry. And so I need to come to terms with that, and I need to make a decision to head in a different direction, to try to find a better way than my perspective and the way I've been handling things and the way I think. I've got to find a better way, and that really is what I believe recovery is. And then in step 4, I'm asked to inventory the most common manifestations of self, the most destructive manifestations of self, and those are resentment, fear, and the personal consequences of my bad behavior and how that's affected me. And then in step 5, I need to be really honest, and I need to lay it all out on the table. I need, this is me, warts and all. This is the whole ball of wax. And I get done with that, and I look at step 6, which is I need to become willing to have God remove these things, remove the things about myself that are blocking me off from a spiritual life, that are blocking me off from an experience with God, that are blocking me off from connection to you, to connection to the divine. I need to become willing to have God remove those things. Some of them are objectionable. In step 7, I'm really to hand the whole thing over. Step 7 is God, take everything. I have not been a good steward of Chris Schroeder. You know what I mean? I haven't. Yeah, I forgot the owner manual or whatever. But I have really screwed up my life. I'm alcoholic now. I've caused damage all over the place. I'm uncomfortable with myself. I'm uncomfortable with my environment. My personal relationships are a mess. There's got to be a better way. God, please take all these things. And then there's a statement. It says we've now completed step 7, and I believe so much that that's true. My first run through the steps, I thought that there was all kinds of stuff I was going to need to do. I was going to need to get character defect removal for dummies, and I went to all the self-help sections and everything. There's got to be additional extra credits. But today I believe no. I humbly ask God to remove these character defects. I've now completed step 7, and I move on from there. End the sentence, and I move on. And I put a list of institutions and people together that the manifestations of my selfishness and self-centeredness have damaged and harmed. And then in step 9, I actually go out and attempt to straighten out the past, to become accountable for my behavior. Here's a funny thing, and I don't expect anybody to believe this. This is just where I am right now. And next year, I might have a complete different perspective on it. But I'm going to say it like this. I'm not responsible for anything that happened when I was drinking in my alcoholism. All the damage, all that stuff, not responsible. And the reason I say that is this. I'm powerless over alcohol. I'm being driven by 100 forms of fear and character defects. You know, I'm not in control of my emotional nature. You can't take all of those things and then blame everything on me. I have an illness. I'm very sick. So I don't believe that I'm responsible, but step 9 shows me something very, very important. Step 8 and 9 show me something very important. I need to be accountable. I need to be accountable for all the damage that was caused. I may not be completely responsible for what I did in blackouts, right? But I have to be accountable. That there's a magic to that. And so I go out and I try to make amends for the harms that I've caused. And that thought, you know, brings me to step 10. And I believe step 10 is it's a step that teaches me how to be reactive in the spiritual world, how to react from a spiritual vantage point. I've learned a whole lot with the first 9 steps. I've learned, you know, even when I didn't think that they were going to work or they were going to be necessary for me, when I did them, I always got a good reaction. I always said to myself, you know what? Yeah, that was the right way to do it. That amends was the right thing to do. That 5th step was you know, transformational for me. So in step 10, there's a number of different instructions. If I need to make amends, I need to make amends quickly. Now my last experience with amends was I was going back and making amends for stuff I did 20, 30 years before, right? Well, hopefully I've cleaned up all that stuff. And step 10 is showing me how I can stay clean in a reactive way. And it's suggesting that I make amends quickly. There's something, here's another thing that I believe. I don't believe we get punished for our sins. I believe we get punished by our sins. So when we harm someone, there's spiritual damage that happens to us. And you don't want to be carrying around a lot of spiritual damage if you want to stay unblocked from the spirit. So it's asking me to make amends quickly if I've harmed somebody. To talk to somebody, I learned that being honest with someone in the 5th step was incredibly important. So I need to continue that experience of honesty and being transparent and authentic into my way of life. So it asks me to do that. And step 10 and especially step 11 continue to point out what the problem is. Continue to recognize the manifestations of self that defeat you. Continue to recognize selfishness, dishonesty, fear. Continue to be awake to those. And there's a way to react. There's a way to connect with the divine every single time you recognize that. And step 10 and step 11 are going to be giving us spiritual practices to do that. Step 11, I break it down like this. And here's the thing: the longer you're sober and the more you apply these principles, they become a way of life instead of like a mechanical, check the box kind of an experience, like you're taking out the trash or you're walking the dog. They become integrated in your persona. And I still break down step 11 into three buckets though. And I do it like this: upon awakening. And there's a series of instructions in upon awakening, and I won't read them, but what they ask us to do is they ask us to be prepared by connecting with God. Be prepared for the manifestations of self, the selfishness, the self-seeking, the resentment, the fear. Be prepared for those by asking God right out of the gate, to basically minimize them or give you the tools or the strength or the direction, to move in another direction from them. And then there's a bunch of wonderful promises in here. It says we've begun to sense the flow of God's Spirit into us. One day it just kind of dawned on me that these 12 steps are basically about preparing myself, making myself ready for the actual power of God to work in me and through me and do for me what I can't do for myself. It became clear one day. So what we have is we have a program that arms us with the power of God. That's unbelievable. They don't even offer that in church usually, right? But we can gain access to this. I'm sure everybody in this room has experienced this in one way or another. Each of our spiritual experiences and developments has happened, in different ways at different times, and that's perfect because now we can own it. Now it's ours. It's not like it was just given to us or we were told, how it was gonna happen. But each day, we must carry the vision of God's will into all our activities. And, the upon awakening sets the stage for that. I think the evening review is just, constructively asking ourselves, have we engaged with the Spirit? Have we tried to practice these principles in all of our affairs? And are there things we could have done better? Or is there any action that's going to need to be taken because I fell short of the spiritual life? And the evening review kind of wraps that up. As we go through the day, it gives us some real tools for moving through the day. It says we pause when agitated or doubtful. We're going to get agitated, we're going to get doubtful. Don't just do something, stand there, is what this is saying. Because we can't be trusted. Ask for the right thought or action. Continue to ask for the right thought or action. I think that's very, very important. I changed sponsors about 2 years ago. My sponsors just kept moving away on me. You ever have a sponsor move away on you? It's really unbelievable. It should be a rule in AA that's not allowed. But they kept moving away on me. And I asked, this guy came in from California, and I asked him to speak at my home group, and he came and he gave a talk that really blew me away. It came from another emotional place, right? And I was really affected by it, and I could tell that he had done some really, really deep spiritual work. And here I am, not really using my moved away sponsor as much as I should. And I asked him to sponsor me. And he's a guy who runs a giant horse farm. It's like a 500-acre horse farm in western New Jersey. And he does equestrian stuff. I mean, he's a cowboy. He wears a cowboy hat. But there was something really, special about this guy. The way he walked, the way he existed, on this planet just came from a different place. And I asked him to sponsor me. And we've done some spiritual work. And I'm going to share 3 things that he's asked me to do. And then I'm going to sit down and I'm going to let my friend Steve fix anything that I broke up here. So he gave me these 3 exercises. He goes, Chris, I'm going to give you 3 exercises. Now, this was perfect for me because I believe in the economy of the 12-step process. I've never met anybody that doesn't complicate this thing. You'll read the instruction and then you'll go, well, what they mean by that is, and you'll add like 13 layers to the instruction. I mean, that's one of the aspects of alcoholism. So I really love it when things are simple, when things are kept simple. And he gave me 3 very, very simple instructions. And he goes, I want you to do this like as many times as you can possibly remember. I want you to do this. And he goes, the first thing I want you to do is tell yourself what you're doing whenever you're doing it. I go, what do you mean by that? Well, he says, if you're walking out to the car, I want you to say, I am now walking out to the car. And then say, I am now getting in the car. And I am now driving to buy stuff that I don't need. Or whatever you're doing. Just tell yourself what you're doing. And I'm like, that sounded a little bit crazy to me. And then the next thing he said is I want you to ask God for help. Whenever you're doing something, like, I called him up one time with some, how sponsees are, they call you up with crap. And I called him up one time, it was something like, Andrea was mad at me because I don't make the bed or, some like tragic situation like that. And he goes, well, Chris, what I do is, I ask God for help. He goes, if I'm going to go take water to the horse, I go, God, help me take water to the horse. God, help me walk the horses out to the pasture. God, help me. So I started doing that. It sounded stupid, right? I started doing that. And then the next thing he asked me to do is, he goes, Chris, every time you walk outside, I want you to look up. I'm like, and? He goes, no, that's it. Just when you walk outside, look up. Okay, I'll do that. Let me tell you what these 3 exercises did and what they mean for me today. And I don't want you to think I do this stuff all the time. I mean, the spiritual life is a life of forgetfulness. If you know anything about the spiritual life, it's a life of dodging and weaving. But let me tell you what I got from it. When I tell myself what I'm doing, it's an exercise in being in the now. Okay? It's recognizing the present. So many of my problems and so much of my emotional pain was reflecting on the past or being anxious about the future. And this was an exercise to just kind of center me in the right now. Right now, I am doing this, and I got a lot of peace from it. Asking God for help, what that did was that connected me to the power more often during the day than I had been, understanding that God is my manager now. My manager needs to be part of what I'm doing. God needs to be part of what I'm doing. So that was an exercise in the consciousness of the presence of God, which the book says is one of the most important things we can experience, the consciousness of the presence of God. And when I started to go out and look up, I was constantly looking up at the sky or looking at the landscape. what that did is that brought me to a really deep sense of gratitude. You know, I'm a human being having a spiritual experience on this incredibly beautiful planet. You know, this God created this playground for us. And I'm on recess with you guys every day. You know what I mean? Like I truly have an incredible gratitude for being given this miracle of consciousness as a human being on this planet, and having this experience with all of you. And I love Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've become a huge fan and huge proponent of these steps, because they've just transformed, my life. And I think the people that are close to me have even benefited from my personal spiritual experience. But anyway, with that, I want to bring up Steve.
Thanks, Chris, and good morning, everyone. Steve Lee, alcoholic. And great to be on the home stretch. You know, I woke up this morning, and immediately I looked around the room and started kind of packing and thinking about my flight this afternoon, and just had to slow down and say, you know what, we're still here. And it's really hard sometimes to be here. I think Chris was just talking about that, right? I heard a friend of mine, and one of the sponsees had called him, and had one of those tragic things going on, and it was one of those things that was about to happen, and hadn't happened yet, but it looked like the train was headed his way, and the sponsor said, "Man, I love you, and I care about you, and I'll do anything for you, and I'll go anywhere with you except the future." And so I'm going to try to stay here for the next couple hours with you guys, and appreciate you doing the same, and really grateful for Chris for stepping in. I've got to sing a duet all weekend with Peter, and now it's like when Sinatra invited different artists to come in and cut the hits and sing with him. So I've just, it's kind of fun for me, and I appreciate that. I was thinking one of the questions yesterday, and I don't remember, I appreciate the panel yesterday was terrific, and Desiree, thank you for last night. That was a terrific talk. I did say one time, I said, somebody, I said, I believe that's one of the best Al-Anon talks I ever heard. I was at a conference and said that to somebody, and I said it to an Al-Anon, and she said, "What makes you think you know what a good Al-Anon talk is?" And I said, "You're right." I said, "The things that I was attracted to in that talk might not have made it a good Al-Anon talk." But I felt better for having heard it, so. But one of the questions yesterday was kind of talking about untreated alcoholism, and I'm not going to define what untreated alcoholism is, but I hear some people say, I wake up every day with untreated alcoholism. And I don't know that that's true of me. It doesn't feel like, but I wake up every day with alcoholism that needs to be treated. And, I don't think I woke up this morning back at square one. But I woke up this morning recognizing that the road ahead is longer than it ever has looked. Because this thing doesn't end, and we're like in the Tour de France, where they are, and Chris just talked about, being in the moment and being in the day. And what we have is a series of days. And in that Tour de France, it runs in stages, right? And it doesn't mean they didn't get anywhere the day before. They got the growth, but they're going to get back on the bike in the morning and do the next stage. And so this is where, when I landed this 10th step, a lot of us are in a pretty good spot. We have begun to do the amends, and I'm look at things now, and when we come through stuff for the first time, it seems like the steps are disconnected in a way that I will do one, and then I will do two, and then I will do three, and that is kind of the way, that's sort of the way we navigate it. But according to the book, I think once I get to step 9, I actually start steps 9, 10, 11, and 12 simultaneously. Now, you don't see it. I mean, when you're coming on it the first time, we recognize it a little later looking back at it, like Chris said, that all of a sudden the numbers, I don't go through a day, all day long and, whoop, there was a number 3, there was a 6, I just did a 10, there was a 7, we look back at the day in that end of day review and kind of go, how did I do today? Oh, and I begin to see maybe where I tripped over myself, and sometimes I see where some good things happened. But it says that this thought brings us to step 10. And so, well, what's the thought that brought me to step 10? Well, at the end of the promises, it says, they will come true if we work for them. It doesn't say sit back now and relax and enjoy them. They will come true if we work for them. So now, now I continue. So step 10 is to keep going step. Step 10 is not new information. It's continue to utilize the information that you have done. Keep doing those things that got you here. And because it says we set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commence this way of life as we set right any new. I can create a new mistake on my way to my first amends. Yeah. And I don't say, you know what, sit tight, I'm going to get back to you. I got about 2 years worth of amends here to make, but I'll be back. When you've just vacuumed the den, or when Connie has just vacuumed the den, well, to be fair, when Maria, who we hired to vacuum the den, and I come home and she comes every 2 weeks, sometimes we just can't wait till that second Thursday to clean up some of the new messes that I've created. And that's all I'm being asked to do. Look around. Did you knock anything over? Did you just spill a little something? I eat in front of the TV, and so, I got crumbs over here. And like Chris said, we'll overcomplicate things. Certainly I will. I hear people say AA is a simple program for complicated people. I'm of the belief that AA is a simple program for simple people who think they're complicated. And because I'm thinking, how does this, but my case is different. My case is unique. It's that thing that tends to get me in trouble. And the 10th step, in the 12 and 12, it says that it's the acid test. That I've been out here doing all this stuff. Now I'm going into my daily living. It's the acid test. And the test is, can I stay sober? Can I stay in emotional balance under all conditions? And can I live to good purpose? So can I stay physically sober, the first half of the first step? Can I stay in emotional balance, the full-on solution to the second step? And then can I use that to useful purpose at the 12th step? Can I now do what you've been helping me do, so now I'm prepared to go live that useful life? Chris talked about the forward to the 12 and 12, and it's also one of my favorite paragraphs. And it was early on. I fell into a book study. That's where my first sponsor was, and it was a small group of about 12 or 13 people, and that could fit into the room. And there was about 25 people that typically there would be 12 or 13 of that 25 at any given time. And the reading prior to that meeting included the forward to that these 12 steps are a group of principles. So when we talk about practicing these principles in all our affairs, what are we talking about? We're talking about, can I now implement these 12 steps into my daily living? Now we've all got, I know, because we are clearly singing to the choir this weekend and preaching to the choir. So I know 80% of the people in here have one of those lists that has the 12 steps and the corresponding principle. And if everybody pulled out their list, there would be some differences in what principle is attached to what step. And what I will tell you, what my belief is that, I was talking on a Sunday morning at a conference, and I was filling in for a person that couldn't be there. And the guy introducing me before to the meeting, it said, now this morning our spiritual speaker is Steve, because that's a Sunday morning spot, right? And I got up and I said, first of all, I don't know if I'm your spiritual speaker or not. This is the spiritual slot, apparently. But if any of our speakers and if any of us here are speaking about Alcoholics Anonymous, it's a spiritual conversation. We've got a spiritual solution to our problem. That's all we're doing. So it was almost an insult to the other speakers to imply theirs was not the spiritual talk. And so I think that can I stay sober? That's the most quantifiable thing in Alcoholics Anonymous. My first sponsor, Frank, when I'm getting ready to get my 2-year anniversary coin, and I was just excited. They had to call off the parade. I went to meetings for 3 weeks picking up a 2-year coin at every meeting, and giving a heartfelt talk behind it. And, and Frank called and he said, Steve, the parade's over, brother. He said, let's get into year 3. And, but, I'm all worked up over this stuff. And he said, here's the thing, Steve. He said that medallion you pick up, that's quantifiable. That is a measurement of time between your last drink and today. And that's the only thing quantifiable. He says, because your spiritual condition is going to ebb and flow. We've been joking about sobriety time, Well, sobriety time doesn't guarantee quality sobriety. We know that. But look, that physical sobriety is measurable. But where I am on the spiritual scale, I wish that I could tell you that for the last 32 years, that you could just, it was just a straight line up the spiritual graph. But the truth is, I'm like an unstable stock that just, and sometimes it's Black Monday, man. Sometimes the market crashes spiritually. So it's like this, man. But I hope over this time that I'm a stock that's trending up. I hope in the long run there continues to be incremental growth, but it is not quantifiable or measurable on any given day. One of the reasons that we continue for that constructive self-examination. How am I doing? And that's part of that 10th step. Believe it or not, before I left my room this morning, I took a quick peek in the mirror just to see how it's looking. Is there something between my teeth or hanging out of my nose? Have I got toilet paper stuck in my back pocket? I'm getting ready to leave the room. Let me take a quick check. That's a constructive self-examination. If I was still in the room looking, that is self-obsession. And we got this interesting dynamic here at AA where you tell me selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my trouble, and then you tell me to look at myself every day. And I got to make sure that I don't get stuck in that quick constructive look and let it transition over into a self-centered exercise, good or bad. A self-centered exercise in beating myself up, a self-centered exercise in falsely building myself up. In fact, either of those, as somebody else said, either of those just means I'm really stuck thinking about me on either side of that coin. And then I would still be in the room, and I wouldn't be out here hopefully being of some use doing what I was invited to do. I'd still be making sure, that everything looked okay. I'd be trying on my third shirt. And I did, but this is the one I did it quickly. And that 10-step, and Chris alluded to it, is a place where if I'm current, because see, we've now entered the world of the Spirit. That's where it says we've now entered the world, that we begin to sense the flow of this God consciousness. I'm beginning to get a sense. In fact, it's a vital sixth sense that I get there. Earlier, you have rocketed me into a fourth dimension. So we live in a three-dimensional world. That fourth dimension is the spiritual dimension. And now that has been added, and the sixth sense, I've got 5 human senses. That vital sixth sense is that awareness of God. Not the presence of God. It's an awareness of a presence that has always been there, that has been blocked off from me by that self, by the pride, by the ego. And now those things have been loosened a little. When that 11th step, and I'll be bouncing forth between the two of them here in a minute, because the book says that taken separately, self-examination, prayer, and meditation all have their benefits. But when logically interwoven as a way of life, they form an unshakable foundation for life. And steps 10, how many meetings, I know you've been in, and that you may have started the debate. How many meetings you've been in where people are arguing about whether the end of day review is a 10th step or 11th step? But wait, that 10th step doesn't that have me doing an end of day review? But this is over and it says 11. And how many people have you heard argue about, somebody says they're going to do another 4th step, and somebody else says you don't do another 4th step, you're doing a 10th step? My God, how far have I progressed if the debate I'm having is whether my inventory should have a 4 or a 10 in front of it? So we get caught up again. So we're playing numerology game when really, am I engaged? Am I doing this? And I've become less concerned about the number and the rigidity of making sure I'm coloring inside the lines. Because the spiritual world is boundless. There are no boundaries in the spiritual world. Just what's happening. What's my experience of it? And I'm a guy that can turn a spiritual exercise into an academic exercise. And I've done that in step 11, and I'll share that with you in a minute. But Chris talked about and began to reference those promises that are in there, and the stuff that will have happened. So I show up at the 10th step, dare I use the word, recovered. Now, I'm also not a recovered debate guy. I said, are you recovered or are you recovering? I said, well, either one's better than drunk. And so why do I want to, I don't care. I'm just totally uninvested. I am through fighting in AA. Because I just want to have my experience, and we share that one with another. Usually it's one-on-one, and sometimes it's in an environment like this. But it does say there that by now, we will have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. And we'll start having a fight about that sentence, I've ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, for by now sanity will have returned as it pertains to alcohol. And then it talks about that I will be, this threw me off for a while, so I want to share my point of view about it, that it talks about this freedom from alcohol, and it says I'll react sanely and normally. And that we'll see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. We're not fighting it, neither are we avoiding it. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. This new attitude toward liquor comes with no thought or effort on our part. I go, are you kidding me? I've been working my ass off in AA. I've been working steps. I've been giving guys rides I don't even like. I've been cleaning up after people that should be cleaning up after themselves. I've been listening to a sponsor who does not understand my problems. What do you mean no thought or effort on my part? But then I realized that there's been a lot of thought and a lot of effort, but none of it has been about gaining a new attitude toward liquor. It has been directed at creating a relationship with God. And this new attitude toward liquor is the side effect. It is the byproduct of this connection with a power greater than myself that solves my problem. So that gave me a different way to look at it. Chris talked a lot more about step 10, and so I'm going to move to 11 because that's a place that I have ebbed and flowed and had a number of different, I will rotate in and out of where I am with that step at a given time, but I've talked earlier in the weekend about the fact that I showed up. I always say, I don't know whether I was atheist or agnostic, to be honest, but I was at least apathetic. I had given no thought nor any investment to a relationship with a higher power. I didn't like the language, as you heard me talk about prayer, God. All of that just made me really uncomfortable. And not holding hands for a while with the Lord's Prayer. So the idea of prayer and meditation was very off-putting to me. So I had I went a number of years ago and I used the phrase, and I've heard a lot of people use the phrase that they struggle with meditation. You know, that's probably, I hear that more than the prayer part, and people say they struggle with meditation. And I was struggling with meditation. And I went to a conference about 17 years ago, and I've referenced Howard yesterday, but Howard P. was there, and Howard was a devoted practitioner of meditation. And he just, not only did he love meditating, he loved talking about meditating. And I went to this conference and I sought Howard out and I said, Howard, man, I'm struggling with meditation. And if you knew him, he was a nebbish looking little man with Coke bottle glasses, and he was a literal rocket scientist. And he always looked like he'd slept in his clothes. And he went, oh, Steve, let's go to my room. And we went to his room and he said, so you're struggling? He said, what are you doing now? I said, well, I'm really not doing anything now, Howard. He went, oh, I see. Your trouble's not technique, it's commitment. He said, you're not struggling with meditation, you're not meditating. See, I'm struggling. So what Howard identified my problem then and my problem now, it's not the struggle, it's the discipline. The book says we let God discipline us in this simple way. That discipline isn't punishment. That discipline isn't to get me back in line. The discipline is adopting an approach. It's like in martial arts, there are several disciplines you can choose from. I've got a lot of friends now, jiu-jitsu's become a big thing. There are different disciplines of that you can adopt. And Howard said, are you willing to struggle with meditation? Are you willing to create a time and space in which that struggle can happen? Are you willing to make the commitment to devote some time to that process and allow to happen whatever happens? And And I got a busy head. And so I know that there's other people in here. Bill led us in a beautiful meditation this morning. And I typically have to take the first few minutes having some of the most bizarre and inappropriate thoughts pass through my head. I mean, I've meditated and thought, what the heck? I didn't want to see that, you know. What is showing up here? And kind of let things quiet down. And I've had a variety of experiences. A few years ago, well, 10 or 12 years ago now, I would get somebody ask me to sponsor them, and even if they were brand new, and certainly if they'd been around for a while, I said, for 30 days, what'll help me kind of get to know you, I said, let's do the On Awakening and when retiring at night. I created 2 or 3 little questions there just so they could send me, answer those, I would ask them to give me at least a couple of things they were grateful for in the morning. Do you have any fears or prudent concerns today? And that prudent concerns is something I took from Bill because he talked about fear, but Bill also talked about prudence, which he said was reasonable concern without worry. So it's fear, but less debilitating, something heavy hanging over your head today, something you feel a little anxious about. Make a note of that for me. And then give me 2 or 3 of your plans for the day, whether it's, go to a meeting, whether it's family or work or personal, or just let me know a couple of things. And that'll help me get to know you a little bit as we get this relationship established. There was a young guy, and he got really excited. He went, man, that's fantastic. He said, you do that? And I went, well, I do now. And because no, I wasn't doing that. And I know it's a good idea for you, but so we start exchanging that via text, and a group got a little larger, and then some guys started sending it to some, and this went on for a few years. And as the audience, and what I do with mine is after doing that, I also would find a reading through the various spiritual books or things I've chosen to kind of reference, and just find a passage that's speaking to me that morning, read it, contemplate on it, meditate on it, and then jot down my takeaways from that, how I want to incorporate that into my day. And an audience kind of grew for this. It was going out to some guys I sponsor. It got to about 18 or 20, then some of them were sending it out, and now there's, I'm told a few hundred people are getting this. Well, what happened was that little takeaway, that thing I'm writing in the morning, I began to write it to the readers. You know what I mean? Now I started to write it to you. Think about what you're going to think about what I wrote. Began to spend time. Hell, it was taking me longer to edit this thing, because now it had turned into an academic exercise. It had quit. It ceased being me having a personal experience and then sharing it, and it began me writing what must have been unbelievably deep and insightful thing. And so I wrote them, I said, I got to quit. I caught myself, and I didn't quit till about 6 months after I caught myself, but because takes me a long time to slow down, and but anyway, that's it. And so I let a year or two pass, and now I've been doing that again for a few months with some new sponsees, but it's not. We're not sending out the flyer, to other people, and it has become much more personal again. I did that this morning. That was my morning discipline before coming down here. My meditation is still pretty rudimentary, but I don't apologize. One of the great things that the 12 and 12 says, after giving us a lot of it, says that we could be vague, and they give us a lot of practical advice. But the good news is, right after all the practical advice, Bill says, but in the end, it's essentially an individual adventure. So that means I have this great freedom to find not what sounds good to you, but what is effective for me. And then within the confines of that, I become willing to not be trapped in that, but to experiment and do some other things. So right now, this time of year, even where I live, I get up. Now, a lot of people say on awakening means before you get out of bed. When I wake up, I got something to do. I got to go to the bathroom. So that would cut my meditation time down dramatically. So I go to the bathroom. I go make some coffee. I'll walk out on a little balcony, and I just sit quietly and drink my coffee and think about some stuff. Now, for me, it's easier to say I think about some stuff than to say I'm meditating, but that would be contemplative meditation. Then I read some stuff, and then I think about what I read, and then I write some stuff down about what I read. Now, that sounds like a lot of stuff, but that's really only about 15 minutes of my morning. The thing I'm doing better than I used to do was I'd come in and make the coffee and watch Sports Center for a little while, or God forbid, land on one of the political channels, and then go out and do my quiet time after that. It was harder for me to get quiet. And so this 11th step, Howard said to me that day when we were up in his hotel room, and he said, "Steve, you've done all this work." He said, "You've been here in AA. You've devoted so much time and effort to contact this power greater than yourself." He says, "Why wouldn't you want to get to know him better? Why would you spend all your time on the trip and then not visit with the people you went to see?" And so that's what that feels like a little bit now. Why not just spend a little time? There's no question, I believe, that if and I won't, but if I asked everyone in here the most important relationship of your life, most people would say God. And if you ask me, I would say God. And then you say, "Well, Steve, how much time y'all been hanging out?" So I devote less time to this relationship than people I don't even really care for. Now, it's really not that, and that's not fair to say. It's almost like, it's almost like us being here this weekend. I mean, right now, there's no question that I'm in relationship with my higher power while I'm here talking to you. And I'm in relationship with a lot of you people here. But how about, like I had a couple of times to do this weekend, how about we go spend a little time one-on-one? And am I devoting that one-on-one time to this relationship that I profess is not only the most important relationship in my life, but this relationship that I say is responsible for the nature of all the other relationships in my life? And how about a little one-on-one time? Because I think it's constantly, I think God is ever present, but my awareness is not always heightened. We talked about, and Chris did, that and when I ask God to divorce my thinking from that self-pity, dishonest, self-seeking, to divorce, and it says I can begin, to trust my thinking. It says my thinking will be placed on a higher plane. And the reason is because those things block my vision. So what if they were divorced, and now I can see uninfluenced by self-pity, by dishonest motives, by fear, by anything else? What if I could see clearly? And as that 10-step just said, every day is a day when I must carry the vision of God's will into all my activities. So this is where I'm making a transition from my will, looking through my eyes, to trying to look through God's eyes, to trying to see this through the spiritual prism of the fourth dimension and the sixth sense. What would that look like? The 6-minute story I'll tell in 3, again to end, is that Chris also talked about where it says we begin to rely upon this intuition. And it also says we're going to make some mistakes because it's pretty new to us. Well, years ago, I was going to Toronto to the Ontario Regional Conference. It's a pretty big conference, and I was excited to be going for probably all the wrong reasons, and I couldn't wait to get there, and I had a lot of friends that were going to be there, and I go to the airport in Nashville. We're going to fly from Nashville to Detroit and then change planes, go to Toronto. I go to to the airport. When I get to the gate area, I see a woman, young woman, holding a small child, and she's just weeping inconsolably, talking to the gate agent. And we eventually board the plane. It was a little regional jet. So 50, 60 people. I don't know how many are on it. And a few minutes after everybody had boarded and the plane was full, flight attendant came on and she said, "We've got a young woman out here whose brother has been critically injured in a car accident in Detroit, and she's trying to get to his bedside. Would anybody be willing to give up their seat?" Well, intuitively, I knew that was the right thing to do. I mean, immediately, I know that's the right thing to do, but I started to think about it. And I said, well, man, these folks paid for my plane ticket, and if I miss this plane, I won't make the connection to get to speak tonight at the conference, and they will have spent that money. And I said, and my God, if I don't speak at that conference in in Toronto, AA as we know it could cease to exist, and in Canada at least, and I'm thinking, and they closed the door, and nobody gave up their seat, and we went. Now that night, I'm standing behind a microphone, wearing a coat and tie, talking to a couple of thousand people about spiritual principles. And I'm sitting there knowing that the guy they thought they invited would have gotten off that airplane. And I will talk about spiritual principles and step over opportunities to practice them on a regular basis. And what that taught me, at least where I made a commitment that day, was see that first voice. We say in AA a lot, or we hear some people say, first thought wrong, first thought wrong. I got to tell you, I think it would be sad for me to be sitting here today at almost 33 years sober if my first thought was always wrong. What happens is more often than ever, not all the time, but more often than ever, my first thought is right, and I will shout it down. My thinking, my pride, my ego will shout it down and go, no, that couldn't work. That's not right. No, give me a million reasons why not to do what showed up. Now, so I made the decision to honor that intuitive thought. And sometimes I pay for it. See, but what I discovered, I'm making mistakes either way. I'm going to bat about 500 either way, but I've decided to make the mistake based on trying to listen to the intuitive thought rather than the egocentric mind. And that has changed my approach to things, and I think it informs what the Serenity Prayer says, that knowing, change what I can, accept what I can't change what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference comes from me making those choices over time. And I begin to trust that intuitive voice more and more. So let's eat some brunch.